Hey there, what's going on? Welcome to Let's Talk IT Careers, episode 27, entitled Public Speaking, Escape the Podium. My name's Tim Warner. Here we are back in action in this mini-series on public speaking skills. And the problem statement that I have for you this time around is how many times have you attended a lecture, presentation, whatever the specifics are, and the speaker stays behind his or her podium the entire time. Now, I feel that this issue creates a physical and psychological barrier between the presenter and the audience. And therefore, in my experience, I've been doing this for about 20 years or so, speaking professionally. It's a much better deal to get out from behind the podium. Besides the height issue, I'm not a particularly tall person myself, so it might come across that I'm hiding behind the podium when I simply don't have the height to have any kind of supposedly commanding presence behind it. But also there's the logistical, practical issue that if I have a podium in front of me, there's a temptation to lean on it rather than to gesture. And yes, I have to confess I've done it before, hiding behind the podium. Either if my self-image is bad and I'm feeling not good in my skin, or if I'm not in my mind is on top of my subject matter as I'd like to be, the podium presents a nice opportunity to hide. But unfortunately, I've found that this does not bear good fruit from the attendees' standpoints for many reasons. Therefore, the solution that I propose and that I practice is to remove as many barriers as possible between you and your audience. Now, the podium, if there is one, is an obvious first choice. Now, if you've watched my episode, my Let's Talk IT Careers episode on TED Talks, you know that I'm not a big fan of those. But you'll notice that TED Talks don't use a podium. So it's just the speaker with no physical intermediaries between that speaker and their audience. Now, there's other ways to produce a barrier. If you're a fan of body language like I am, you will not, or I will not, cross my arms or adopt other closed body positions. I want just the opposite. If you've ever heard of power poses, I discussed those early on in my first few episodes of this Let's Talk IT Careers series. Just do a Google search for presentations, power poses. A professor from Harvard came up with this idea, and you see the silhouettes at left. Those are open body postures. From left to right, there's just simply standing with your arms down, nothing to hide. There's using gestures, including open hand gestures and showing your palms to your audience. These actually do convey psychologically the notion that you are credible, you're believable, you're relatable, and you're trustable. The hands on the hips I adopt sometimes, if for no other reason, just to bolster my own self-esteem if I'm feeling at all shaky. I don't use the hands behind the head because that, to me, at least my perspective, is it's a bit aggressive, and that's the last thing I want to convey when I'm speaking or teaching, because most of my public speaking I'm actually teaching. At the same time, don't go overboard with this. So you're outside of the podium, you're walking around. That's something else. Another thing to do is to walk around and own the area where you're presenting. If it's in an auditorium or in a boardroom, you have some defined area. It could just be a couple steps, or it could be an entire stage. Make use of it, but also don't go overboard. You want to adopt a nice balance in your dynamics, your physical dynamics as well as your verbal ones. This actually reminds me of something I wish I added to my episode on the multi-channel mind. In that episode, I mentioned that a hallmark of a quality presenter is that he or she has different tracks running in their brain. There's the content track, there's the audience track where you're thinking, how is what I'm transmitting landing with the audience? And then there's metadata looking at the environment. How's the temperature? How's the lighting level? How are my slides? How's everything pulling together that way? And I guess I would add a fourth element, maybe a fourth track, and that is the body track. What am I doing to remove barriers between me and the audience? Am I using gesturing well? Am I moving around well? But going overboard can create a distraction, and you can also combine all of these skills with the power of silence. Some benefits to escaping the podium and standing directly in front of your audience are that you come across as more open and approachable, especially when you combine this with open body language. The thing that I would suggest you definitely don't do is cross your arms or cross your legs one over the other. That's in my opinion, a big no-no in any kind of public speaking. You want to show your hands, show your palms, and be open. Now, I haven't explicitly stated it, but let me go ahead and say so. I'm presuming that you're not trying to deceive your audience, that you're actually there to deliver an honest to goodness message. I submit that by adopting this open posture and standing next to the podium or away from it as much as you can, you're improving your confidence, presence, credibility, and then by extension, the overall effectiveness of your presentation. And you also provide to your audience some visual variety. I'm not sure how long you're speaking. I've spoken in a public setting for as short as 3 minutes and as long as all day. Especially if you're leading a longer session, it's a good idea to move around, if for no other reason, to keep the blood circulating in your body, to keep your muscles flexing, and also to give your audience something more interesting to look at than just a head behind a podium. Tools are always a good idea. This answers the question, how can you begin to implement this notion of standing away from the podium? I oftentimes am tied to my keyboard, actually, because I'm maybe doing something with PowerShell or actually with IT. Most of the time when I'm demonstrating something, I do need to be at the keyboard. So if I can't afford to step totally away from the podium, I'll at least get out from behind it, stand next to it. Sometimes I'll lean against the podium. Leaning, I generally advise against because it can have you not concentrate so much on your physical dynamics. But at the same time, leaning also is a nice way of transmitting the message that I'm confident up here, I'm comfortable up here, and you and I are just having a really informal, nice conversation. More to the topic with tools. I'm a big fan of presentation remotes. Logitech is my go-to vendor for that. Just go to their website and look. This, what you see on screen, I believe the model number is R800, and it serves really well. You just plug that USB dongle into a USB port of your computer. I've done this on Mac and Windows, no problem. And it's an easy way not only to cycle through your slides in your slide deck from hundreds of feet away from your computer, but also you can use the integrated laser pointer. I'm a huge fan of pointers to actually draw my audience's attention to what's on the screen when I'm away from the podium. And Logitech, as they evolve their products, they continue to add new features. There's even a model more recent than the R800 that has timers. In fact, the R800 has a timer that helps you keep your presentation on track time-wise. And there's a blackout control if you want to black out the screen to kind of force your audience to look at you rather than the screen. Another tip is to use index cards or stickies and post those around the podium to literally prompt you to move around and to remind you. And also, one of my biggest go-to tricks is to make sure I arrive to the venue early to map out the area where I'm speaking. Preferably, if it's at a conference, I'm going to go in the room when the room is unused so I can literally have a chance to get up at the podium, inspect all of the physical connections, look at the steps, see if there's anything I need to be aware of as far as the stage, walk around, get a feel for what it looks like from that perspective. And the more comfortable you are during that prep phase, the more commanding you'll be when you actually come in to deliver the presentation. Some complications to this. Sometimes you have to stand behind the podium. If you're speaking in a more formal academic or business venue, they may have their logo or their company seal or whatever printed on the podium, and you need to stand there for publicity reasons, for photographs and so forth. I mean, that's just simply unavoidable. In that case, I would draw your attention to the double importance of using open body language and gesturing from behind the podium. Another thing is if you've forgotten your presentation remote or you need to type, that's happened to me more than once. I have discovered, I use an iPhone for my mobile phone, that there are iOS apps, and I'm sure there's Android apps as well, that allow you to do Bluetooth presentation remote functionality, but it's too awkward for me to be messing with a cell phone in my hand while I present. But note that that's a possibility. Another is if you're trapped by cables. MSSA is a prompt for me to remember that I teach to the U.S. Armed Forces from time to time. Microsoft has a program called MSSA. It's an academy. And when I present at these military bases, there's oftentimes situations where I'm literally trapped at the presentation area because the cable's not long enough or whatever. Just the logistics are such that I can't move. And when I do that, I make sure to make a joke when I start the presentation that, help, I'm trapped, just so they understand that I want to come out from behind the podium, but logistics prevent me from doing so. I hope you found this a high-impact session. If you want to engage me for any reason, my name is Tim Warner, and my Twitter is TechTrainerTim. I post tech news a few times every day. My website is timwarnertech.com, and my work, my computer-based training work in Microsoft Azure and other cloud technologies is at pluralsight.com. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'll see you in the next episode.